Hello, ladies and gentlemen, lads and lasses, and welcome back to Patrimo Sports for the first time in a very long time, quite frankly. For the first video back, I'm going to be talking about the World Cup, the new rules, whether they're worthwhile or whether we're nitpicking for absolutely no reason. We're going to be talking about who's impressed me, who hasn't impressed me, who I think's going to go far, who I don't think's going to go far, and also the fact that Lionel Messi has just broken the World Cup goal scoring record as we speak. So what better place to start on the return than the World Cup, and what better place to start within that than Lionel Messi breaking Miroslav Klose's World Cup goal scoring record with a goal against Austria. Now, we did miss a penalty in the game early doors, and it was a horrific penalty at that, but the goal, brilliant goal, exactly what you expect to see of Lionel Messi, especially in his late age. And I would actually quite like to see exactly how many of his goals have come from this exact situation. Started the move off, continued his run, the ball went out wide, came back to the edge of the box, and he just slotted it into the bottom corner like he was just out for a Saturday stroll with his missus. And look, I think no matter what side of the debate you're on between Messi and Ronaldo, I don't think you can dispute that this World Cup performance, thus far at least, obviously we're yet to see what happens, is just cementing Lionel Messi as the GOAT. Now, that's completely irrespective of whatever Ronaldo's doing, because the hat trick, the goal here was an excellent goal, and he, I have to still make an argument for him being the best player in the world at the current moment. I'm not sure there's a side in world football who wouldn't benefit from Lionel Messi being in the side. Now, of course, you've got the lack of running that comes about these days, the lack of pressing, because he is getting on a bit. But give him the ball in a moment, he still has the exact same ability and the exact same explosiveness to be able to do anything, and much more than anybody else in world football can do on a football pitch. Hello, this is me from the next day, because I did the segment about Messi breaking the World Cup goal scoring record, and then proceeded to watch France and Norway, and obviously Mbappe scored twice and Haaland scored twice. So I thought we'd do them a disservice if I didn't come back and talk about them a little bit, to be honest, because this Golden Boot race during this World Cup is going to be something special. Now, I suppose the problem for Haaland is he probably doesn't have the best team behind him compared to the other options there, Mbappe, Messi, and Kane being those three. But they're looking good at the minute, and I'm going to do a segment in a minute about the teams that have impressed me so far in this tournament, and I should probably add them to the list after watching them yesterday, because that Senegal side is not a bad side, and they looked very good. And from Mbappe's point of view, I mean, he's scored twice again, so that puts him once again two behind Messi, and he's still got at least one more World Cup in him, so that almost guarantees him to break the record if he might overtake Messi during this tournament, the way it's looking, because, I mean, if France could well go further than Argentina during this competition, and if that's the case, I don't see a world where we don't end this World Cup with Mbappe on top of that chart, to be honest with you. And then obviously Harry Kane's playing tonight, as I edit this right now, and I'm hoping to have it out before that. I hope I will, otherwise I'm going to have to do another segment again for the fact that he's also scored twice, because I wouldn't be surprised if that happened, because he looks like on top form at this tournament, and England look like they're going to go quite far again, as I'll talk about in a minute. So yeah, I just thought I'd come back and have a little bit more of a conversation about the World Cup Golden Boot race, because it's going to be pretty mental, I think. And speaking of Argentina, I must admit, I've watched them both times now, and I do think that they are one of the only big nations who have actually impressed me at any sort of capacity so far. I think you've got England, who were obviously excellent against Croatia, at least in the second half. First half was still a bit dodgy, and then France as well. Now, I think Senegal are an excellent side. I predicted Senegal to go far in this tournament, so I think that was a really good win for them. Obviously, they're playing Iraq tonight. Again, you'd expect them to win that game. Now, France didn't necessarily impress me from a performance standpoint, but I think the fact that they were still able to overcome the challenge of a good side like Senegal, whilst playing as poorly as they were, and just kind of turn it on when they needed to in that second half, I think that is a sign of things to come from France in this tournament. I would say England are probably the side who impressed me most throughout the tournament in terms of the pure performance perspective. I mean, first off was still a little bit lacklustre, but then again, they were playing a good Croatia side with some very good players in there as well. I think the only thing that I saw against Croatia, which could be a bit of a problem, is in the past we've probably been too defensive and not gone for games enough. And I wonder whether this tournament we might go for things too much and maybe not have the defensive shape that we need to have, because we did look very shaky at the back. But And I think if there's any change that Thomas Tuchel makes going forward, it has to be bringing Mark Gahey into one of those centre-back positions. I'd probably take Konsa out and I'd move John Stones to the right-hand side because Gahey is a left-hand-sided centre-back. One of the big issues was playing out from the back. John Stones isn't used to going out to the left-hand side. Now, Nico O'Reilly's a big asset down that side. Anthony Gordon would have been a big asset, could we have got him the ball? But John Stones isn't used to going that way, so naturally when he gets the ball, he's always looking to come back inside. You've got Konsa on the other side who's also looking to go that way. So that left-hand side just got completely neglected. Because Ghana's not going to be the most straightforward of games, and it is going to be a little bit of a test. Probably quite a good game for England to have at this stage of the tournament. To go back-to-back through Croatia to Ghana, I think it's probably going to be a good indicator of where they're at right now. But I have to say, I would put them up there as one of the favourites. Would put us up there as one of the favourites. Don't know why I said them. And apart from that, I do think a lot of the other big nations have been somewhat disappointing. I mean, Germany put 7 past Curacao, but I don't think they looked particularly good in that game. Dennis Undav, by the way, what a footballer he is. Someone's going to pick him up for a lot of money after this World Cup because, I mean, the impact he makes on a game is just ridiculous. But in terms of the teams who have impressed me, the ones I've got written down here are the US. I think the intensity was so high against Paraguay. Now, we didn't think Paraguay were a particularly good side, but then Paraguay went and beat Turkey. Now, we'll get on to Turkey for some very different reasons in a moment because they have been awful, but that Paraguay side isn't exactly the easiest side to play against, and they made that look very easy. And then I didn't actually see the game against Australia, but Australia seemed to start the tournament pretty well in that game against Turkey, although again, we'll talk about Turkey for being awful, but I do think the US are impressive, and they do seem, at least if they win their group, to have a reasonably decent run going forward, so I think they could go quite far in this competition. You've also got Japan on the list. I think Japan were excellent both times I've watched them. They just look so organised. They look, every part of their game is so on point, and they've got that 100-year plan within the country to make themselves a footballing powerhouse, and I think it's by 2036 or something they think they can be competing for the World Cup. It might be a little bit later, might be like 2050 or something, I'm not sure. But they can. I genuinely don't see a reason why they can't go and compete for the World Cup now, like this current World Cup that we are currently witnessing. I would not be surprised to see them go far at all, and I think there is real scope for a continent that we haven't seen a World Cup winner from before to go and win this World Cup, because again, like I mentioned with those big sides, I'm just not seeing a lot of things that are impressing me right now. The Ivory Coast as well is another one I want to talk about now. I think they have been excellent. They look physical. They look like they've acclimatized to the conditions really well. They look technical enough to compete. I think the issue for them is just going to be making sure that they can score those goals when it really matters, because as we saw the other day with that Simon Adingra chance, absolutely fluffed it. Now, that you can well put that down to the player, but I just think it's important that they really make the most of those opportunities when they get them, because again, I think if they can go through the group stage, I genuinely think there's scope for them to take a big scalp going forward. Hello, it's me again from the next day. I can't believe I made that segment about team moves impress me and I didn't talk about either Cape Verde or Curacao. I mean, what's wrong with me? Now, I know obviously they're underdogs, so any sort of performance is going to impress you, but I think specifically Cape Verde in that game against Uruguay, they possibly should have, won that game, I would say. I mean, obviously Uruguay had chances, but that's always going to be the case with a nation like Cape Verde. But that chance at the end that they had, I mean, that had me up and about in my bedroom at 2:30 because I thought that was it. And I think the thing about those two nations at this World Cup is it reminds me a lot of when a Premier League side plays a lower league team in like English football in the FA Cup. And there's quite often those Premier League sides don't beat the smaller sides by as much as you possibly think they would. Obviously, you have those anomalies like Man City versus Exeter last year. I suppose it's not an anomaly, but you have those games where the side you'd expect to batter the other team does. And that's kind of what happened. Germany-Curacao, Germany ended up winning 7-1. But there's always the chance, because the players in those sides have still, they've come through the top academies, they have the top technical ability, they understand the tactical side of things. So being able to put it together in a one-off performance or in a one-off game at like a World Cup or something, I think that's easier for them than having to sustain it across a whole season, say in club football, if that makes sense. And I think that is the main reason why they're doing well. And I would not be shocked if Cape Verde qualify. However, I also wouldn't be shocked if they went and got beat off Saudi Arabia, because I think those teams are more even. They're going to be less the underdog. They're probably going to have more of the ball, and it's going to be about how they cope with that and whether they're able to break down the low block of what I'd imagine will be a low block of Saudi Arabia. On the other hand, Saudi Arabia might come out and get at them because they think they should be winning that game, and that'll leave space for Cape Verde, like they have done against Uruguay, to exploit it, and they are deadly on a counter attack. So I think that game's in the balance, but I would not be surprised to see Cape Verde qualify, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see Cape Verde get beat off Saudi Arabia, if that makes sense. In terms of the teams who didn't impress me very much, I think the main one in terms of the big boys is probably Portugal. They just looked really poor, and I know this is obviously well documented, but I think it was mainly the cohesiveness of the side. They've got lots of good players across the entire pitch, but they just didn't look like they were playing together. There was no patterns, there was no passing structures or anything in place. They just all looked like they were playing as individuals rather than as a team, which I think is interesting, because especially if you look at that midfield three, if you were doing a pick and mix of a midfield from across all the teams in the tournament, there's a big argument that the three you would pick are João Neves, Vitinha and Bruno Fernandes. That is the best midfield in the tournament in terms of a country, but they also might be the best three midfielders in the tournament as well. Now, a lot has been made of Cristiano Ronaldo being the man who is holding them back. Now, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say he was amazing, but he wasn't really involved that much, to be honest. And I think that's one thing they need to get on top of, especially if he's going to play going forward. Because for me personally, Gonçalo Ramos should be the starter for Portugal. He's got a very good goal record and minimal minutes at PSG, which might be why Roberto Martinez is bringing him off the bench. But I think if you're going to win a World Cup, you need someone who's more mobile than Cristiano Ronaldo, maybe. Now, Ronaldo's movement in that game against DR Congo I thought was quite good. He got into some good areas, and they weren't finding him, and I think that's down to that lack of cohesiveness in other areas. But if that cohesiveness is going to be the case, that's when Gonçalo Ramos needs to play, and I do ultimately think starting Cristiano Ronaldo week in, week out, game in, game out, is what is going to be the downfall of Portugal at this tournament. Not necessarily because of him, even though he is obviously past his best. It's not necessarily him starting that's the problem. It's those around him not adapting to him being the starter that's the problem. In terms of other names, we've got Turkey. Obviously, I've mentioned them twice before. Oh my goodness me, how many times have we had Turkey as dark horses for a tournament and they've just gone and done absolutely nothing? But now it looks like they've got the players to do so. You've got Kenan Yildiz, you've got Arda Güler, maybe that's about it, but that's not the point. They should be doing a lot better than they are. They looked toothless in attack, they looked poor defensively, all at sea for not the first time at an international tournament within the last decade. Brazil are probably the other big side who really didn't impress me at all. Now, I didn't watch their game against Haiti because just not that bothered about that game, to be quite honest with you, and at the time of the morning there was not a chance I was staying up for that. I did watch the Morocco game, and Morocco just looked a level above, which player for player shouldn't be the case, but teamwork wise, the way they worked as a cohesive unit, similar to what I was talking about with Portugal, Brazil just didn't have it in midfield. They got overrun. Now, of course, I'm a Newcastle United fan, so watching Bruno Guimaraes play there, he was almost non-existent. But I think with Bruno, what you need is someone who's, now if Bruno's athletic and he covers a lot of ground, right? But I think what you need in there next to him is someone who's also able to cover ground and is able to win the ball back and give it to him in those areas where he can go and do something. Now, he was playing alongside Casemiro, and Lucas Paqueta was the other one in there, I believe. Let me have a quick check. Yeah, the other one of those three was Lucas Paqueta, and I think you've got Paqueta, who's almost quite a similar player to Bruno in terms of that creative spark, but is also doesn't have the work rate to be able to go and win that ball back and give him it in areas where he can play. And I think obviously from Casemiro's perspective, another one, very old, legs aren't quite there anymore, and I think overall that midfield balance just wasn't really there. And obviously they beat Haiti 3-0, and I saw a lot of people saying that was a little bit of a better performance from them, but at the end of the day, you're playing Haiti, no offence Haiti, so I don't know how much you can read into that. And if they were that poor against Morocco, I think whenever they do come up against a big side, or even a half-decent side, I wouldn't be surprised, like I was mentioning earlier, with the likes of the Ivory Coast or Japan, if they ended up playing one of those sides, I would not be surprised at all to see them get knocked out. And if I had to give you one hot take going forward, what I think is going to happen, what I think the outcome of this tournament is going to be, the only thing I can look to is that we're going to see a new winner, and it's not going to be one of the favourite nations, because I don't even know whether that's a hot take at this point, having watched them all play. I think Japan. I'm not going to put Ivory Coast in there. I think probably Japan, or the one who I can see going all the way, which sounds mental to say, but I just think there's something about them, and I'm feeling it, and I can see it. I can see them lifting the trophy at the end of the competition. Whether that's naive of me or not, we'll soon find out, but that's the hot take going forward anyway. Now, moving on to the new rules. Now, there's a plethora of new rules. I'm not even sure if I figured out what they all are yet, but a lot of them are centred around keeping the ball in play for longer and making the game flow quicker than it has done across the last couple of seasons, across the last couple of international tournaments. And in terms of the statistics, under these new rules, the ball in play has gone from 56% to 59%. Now, that 56% was the amount of time the ball was in play during a game on average at both Qatar and Russia, if that makes sense. I think it does. And the 59% is how much the ball has been in play across the 90 minutes on average at this tournament. Now, the question, I suppose that 3% across a 90 minutes is actually quite a lot, but I suppose the question is changing the format and adding all these new things in so much worth it for 3%? I'm not sure. Now, obviously, you're only at the first set of games, so that might improve going forward, and we might see that be better as you get into the sort of knockout stages of the tournament, where the stakes are bigger and teams are less likely to still go and like roll around after a challenge and all that sort of thing. I think that's where you might really see these new kind of trying to speed up the play rules kind of get that new level. But as of right now in the group stages, I'm not seeing anything that would necessarily suggest it's worth it to add all these new things in and keep them in for the long term. Maybe for a one-off at a tournament, it's okay, but I wouldn't say I'd like to see it at a Premier League game for the entirety of the season. I think we'd get a little bit bored after a certain amount of time. We've got that new red card rule as well for putting your hand over your mouth. Now, Miguel Almiron knows all about that, doesn't he? Because he became the first person to ever be sent off under that rule. Now, I'm a Newcastle United fan, and I would say I've got a reasonably good grasp on Miguel Almiron as both a person and as a footballer, and I must admit, I don't think there's any way he'd ever say anything untoward towards anybody. He's just quite a nice chap, to be honest, but the rules are the rules, and he did cover his mouth, and you could tell in that video where the Turkish player runs straight over the referee and snitches on him. You could see on his face he knew straight away what he'd done. And I think obviously all the players have been told that this is going to be the case. I would assume it was just a lapse in concentration from him, and he forgot that it was a thing for a split second, and ultimately he's paid the price for it. Sorry. I can't say that it's a bad rule because we've not. I suppose there's no way that it can be a bad rule. There's always going to be grey areas around it, but if it prevents or at least makes sure that the culprit is punished in situations like that of Vinicius Junior and Prestioni, then I don't see any problem with it. So as much as Miguel Almiron's probably being hard done by because he's quite a nice lad and I don't think he'd say anything to anybody, you can't really have any qualms with it, can you? Oh, and these bloody hydration breaks as well. I'm not being funny. Oh, I don't like them. I don't like them at all because essentially they've just turned into tactical interventions, pretty much, haven't they? 3 minutes where a manager gets to. See, we've turned football into 4 quarters with this, haven't we? Really, if we're being honest, because they're. And I understand from the point of view of they have to have it consistent across all of the games. So if one game has it, every game in the tournament's going to have it, right? But when you see them in the air-conditioned stadium with the roof over, it's nice and cool, and they're just getting a 3-minute break to essentially go over tactics, and if the manager's figured out anything that they can change, he can do that. That's not really how football works. That's not in the spirit of football. Now, I'm saying this as if I'm in a minority. I'm obviously not. I'm in a majority here, and everybody agrees that hydration breaks shouldn't be... I don't want to say shouldn't be in the game, but in the games where it's needed, it makes sense. But then I suppose, like I said, you've got that issue of all the games need to be the same, otherwise people are going to have unfair competition type arguments, aren't they? But I can kind of put up with it for this tournament because I understand that some of those games are going to have such high temperatures that it needs to happen. But it's not one of those that I want to see implemented in football wide, so to speak, which I can see happen, by the way. I don't think there's it wouldn't be any surprise to me if FIFA or UEFA or whatever came out at the end of the year and said, look, yeah, hydration breaks, got to have them in all games now. And with that little rant, so to speak, about hydration breaks, that comes to the end of this little World Cup discussion video. Now, as we speak, Argentina are still 1-up against Austria, so it looks like it's going to be another win for them. We've got France versus Iraq coming up next, which is going to be a thrilling game to watch. And then Norway at Senegal at 1 o'clock in the morning. If I can be bothered to stay up for that, which I'd quite like to stay up for, because I think that's going to be a decent game. But yeah, Patrimo Sports is back in for the long term. Now I know I said that last time I came back, and then proceeded to go away again for a year. But I'm here, and this is going to be consistent. I'm holding myself accountable. So you're going to see more of me if you want to see more of me. So don't be afraid to leave a like if you think it was good. Don't be afraid to subscribe if you want to see more of it. And I will catch you in the next one.